Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and start the House Education Administration Committee. Before we begin, let's have the clerk call the roll.
Representatives Baum, Bulso, Butler, Sapicki, Fritz, Gant,
Here.
Gillespie, Haston, Hurt, Lafferty, Love, McKenzie, Parkinson, Reagan, Ritchie, Stevens, Warner, Vice Chairman Slater, Chairman White. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, members. Let's all, as we begin, before I recognize everybody for any announcements or recognitions, Vice Chair Slater, would you lead us in a opening prayer, please?
Yes, and before we pray today, one of the members that I'm going to mention is Representative Hale. If you will keep him in your prayers as he's dealing with some health issues this week. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given to us, and we do lift up to you Representative Hale. We pray that you'll bring strength to him and healing to him, and that he'll be back with us very soon. Today, as we meet together, may you give us wisdom and divine guidance as we set policy for the students in Tennessee. We pray and ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very, very much. Members, anybody have a recognition or announcement you'd like to make? Chairman Reagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to recognize my shadow here, Miss Rebecca Shelton from my district. Let's make her welcome.
Welcome. Anyone else? Recognition from the committee? Seeing not. Members, a couple of housekeeping items before we begin with our first bill, which will be Leader Cochran. We have 23 bills. The following ones that I announced will be either off notice or be a road. Item number 5, House Bill 2357 by Representative Carringer, off notice. Item number 12, House Bill 1914 by Representative Hale, rolled 1 week. Item 13, HB 1917 by Representative Hale, rolled 1 week. Item 17, House Bill 2487 by Representative Hurt, rolled 1 week. Item number 22, House Bill 2287 by Representative White, rolled 2 weeks. And House Bill 23, House Bill 2561 by Representative White, off notice. Make sure I didn't make any mistake. Representative Parkson?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, and just if you don't mind, just a little point of personal privilege. One of our election commissioners are here. If she'll stand, Counselor Benicia Kimbrough, y'all make her feel welcome. We truly appreciate her. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, without any further announcements, we're on item number 1, House Bill 2480 by Representative Cochran. You're recognized. You have motion and second. Any amendment that we need to address?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we've got 013583.
That is correct. It rewrites the bill, so motion to adopt. Any objections? All those in favor of adding Amendment 13583 to House Bill 2480 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes. Your bill is amended. You're recognized.
All right. Thank you, Chairman and Committee. The bill before you is the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act. This is clarifying in state law that our schools can serve whole milk and whole chocolate milk. Currently, because of federal programming in the lunch line, you can only serve skim milk. But some schools have started to install milk dispensers, which is separate from the lunch program. And so it's actually a machine that you can go up and fill your you can fill a bottle, fill a glass with milk. This is clarifying that in those machines that are separate from the lunch program in the state of Tennessee, you can serve whole milk and whole chocolate milk. There's great nutritional benefits to those drinks, and we want to make sure that kids are exposed to very good tasting milk at an early age. I will yield to any question.
That explanation, any member have a question? Representative Butler, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really difficult to vote on a piece of legislation like this without being able to sample what we're voting on. So I would request to sample.
Thank you, Representative. I will take that into account.
Representative McKenzie.
I'm glad the representative mentioned that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you promised us samples in subcommittee. I'm just throwing it out there, but yeah, I know they're coming. I know they're on the way. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually got a serious question.
Yes, sir.
Where does chocolate milk come from?
That, this feels like a dangerous question. But Mayfield Dairy. Yeah, that's right.
There you go. Good answer.
Representative Ritchie.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question on the bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the question's been called. Any objection? All those in favor of House Bill 2480 going to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Representative Cochran, you're recognized for another announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to avoid any accusation of using props or bribery, I did want to let the committee know that there is an ice cold cooler full of Mayfield chocolate milk in the cloakroom. And it's also in my office for any members of the public for as long as supplies last. So just want to make it, if you'd like to sample the great milk that you just approved, it's in the back.
Here we go.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
Okay. Okay, House Bill we'll keep moving on. House Bill number 2, House Bill 2346 by Chairman Reagan. Recognized. You have a motion second. You have an amendment.
Yes, sir, I do. Amendment drafting code is 13453. Oh, maybe that's what I have.
Okay, we adopted that last week, so it's already on the bill.
Yes.
Okay, it is already on the bills as adopted. You also have another amendment. I don't know if it's, we'll get to that in a minute. Go ahead and explain. Do I have a motion second on his bill? Okay. Chairman Reagan, go ahead and explain your bill, then we'll come back to you. There is another amendment out there, but we'll get to
All
that in a
right.
minute.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this bill is basically correcting an oversight. Many of us were here back in 2016. We passed the Focus Act, which removed the 6 universities in our state that are not part of the UT system from beneath the supervision of the Tennessee Board of Regents. It created locally governed institutions, or LGIs. However, we did not anticipate any possibility that a university board of trustees might be dissolved, and such is possibly upon us. Therefore, what this bill does is set up a stopgap measure, if you will, to allow the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, or THEC, to be able to serve as management oversight and limited duties should such eventuality occur for any of our LGIs. There's a lot of things in the bill we could talk about. For example, there's prohibitions against conflict of interest. If members of the THEC board were to be able to face any decisions that would create that. There's also a status here that establishes that rules, policies, and procedures and guidelines that are in effect when THEC takes over temporarily, those do not get changed by THEC. And likewise, at the request of several people who've come to me on this, for legislative intent, I'm going to quote our Tennessee Constitution, Article 1, Section 20, that no retrospective law or law impairing the obligation of contracts shall be made. That is intended to make sure that any contracts that are in existence at the time such takes place, that the THEC would not dissolve those or have the ability to. With that, sir, I'm ready to answer questions.
Okay, members, before we entertain another amendments on there, anybody have questions or comments to Chairman Reagan on his bill? Seeing none, I'm going to go and recognize Representative Love. You have an amendment, I believe, to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. We have amendment number 016264. I believe it was timely filed. Let me thank the sponsor for at least entertaining the spirit of this particular amendment. Members, what this amendment states is that if a particular state university board happens to fall into the situation where the board is not continued and does not exist and then would be subject to this particular law, it simply says that the faculty member and the student trustee member would be considered members of that.
Representative Love, I apologize. I do need to give you, you got a motion second, continue.
All right, sorry, Mr. Chair. It says in section B, the faculty member may vote on all matters before the commission while the commission is acting as a state university board pursuant to this part for the state university which the faculty member is employed. Essentially what this does is allows the faculty and the student trustee. The faculty member is the only voting member, but the faculty member to vote on matters that would pertain to that university board.
That's the explanation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, with that explanation before us, Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor of the bill, would that be considered a friendly amendment?
Yes, the sponsor's willing to take this as a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Okay, it's recognized as a friendly amendment from the sponsor, Chairman Reagan. Further discussion on the amendment 16264 by Representative Love.
Question to adopt the amendment.
The question's been called on the amendment. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of adding the amendment 16264 to House Bill 2346 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. It's been amended. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, the explanation of the amendment and the explanation I gave you of the bill, which is not really altered that greatly by the amendment, is before you. I stand ready to answer questions, and I ask for your support.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask legal to roll both those amendments together. Thank you. Further discussion? We got Representative Ritchie. Question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 2346 out to Gov Ops indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It moves out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you. Item number 3, House Bill 2758 by Representative Alexander. You got a motion and a second on your. One second. Okay. You have a motion and second on your bill. We have 2 amendments to deal with. The first one is 14734, which we adopted last week, so it's
That's-
already on the bill.
That's correct.
You do have another amendment. It does not write the bill. Would you to explain your bill first, and we'll come back to that amendment?
Absolutely. This bill, as I explained to you last week, would prohibit the use of an electronic device during an instructional time. It gives the LEAs and public charter schools the ability to come up with their own policy on how they would like to handle those cell phones during instructional time and to implement that policy. I went to legal to get some advice on how we could structure this bill so that you all would be very pleased with it. And our first thought was we would say in the bill that you did not have to, this policy would not apply to you if you already had a policy in place. But if you already have a policy that prohibits cell phones in place, then prohibits cell phones, and that's already your policy, then you are already, what's the word? Compliant with the law. Thank you very much. And so what we decided to do was to go one step further and say if you for all policies need to be reported in, and that's what the amendment does. Do you want me to?
Yes, she's starting to
That's-
explain Amendment 16007. Would you make clear what the amendment does?
Yes, that would say that each local board of education and public charter school governing body shall submit the policy required for the respective LEA or public charter school to the Department of Education no later than July 31, 2024. And what that will do is that will.
Do I have a motion and a second?
Mm.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to have the discussion. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Representative
And that
Alexander.
would just give us some data to know if we've got failing schools, then we can look and see if they have a policy and as one of the opportunities to improve their schools.
Representative Sapicki?
So just for clarification, if a LEA already has a policy in place, then all they're going to do is report that policy to the Department of Education so they can say that LEA already has a policy, and then they can go on with life the way it is.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ritchie?
Chairman, are we on the bill or the amendment still?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Do we have a motion, second to adopt the amendment so we can have proper discussion? We've already done that? Okay. Questions on the amendment? All those in favor of adding the amendment 16007, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We're back on your bill as fully amended. Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, sponsor. And I've shared concerns that I have on it. And I reached out to, and I've got a list, Anderson County, I represent Blount County, Chester County, Crockett County, Decatur, Fayette, Fentress, Gibson, Hardeman, Hardin, Henderson, Knox, Lauderdale, Loudon, Marshall, Murray, McNeary, Memphis, Shelby, Metro, Morgan, Oak Ridge, Obion, Overton, Perry, Roane, Rutherford, Sumner, Truesdale, Williamson, and even Washington County that you represent, sponsor. And the one thing that all of these counties had in common is they all already have a policy in place. And what I've been told over and over from my school district, all three of them, is stop passing stuff at the state level to mandate them to do something that they're already doing, to require them to do something else. Since Maryville City Schools, Alcoa City Schools, Blount County, and everybody else that's sitting up here already has these in place, I'm not going to be able to support the bill just for that reason, because this is something that they're already doing.
Representative Alexander.
Well, if they're already doing it, then they're already in compliance. All they got to do is submit it to the Department of It, to the state.
Okay, Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that we move this bill to summer study.
We do have a motion. You have an objection, which with an objection, then we have a roll call vote for that. So, or just a voice vote we can have. Okay. So the motion before us, Representative Warner, would you define your motion one more time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to move Representative Alexander's bill as amended to summer study.
So members, you understand the question. If your vote is yes, it would be moved to summer study. If it's a no, we will continue. So all those in favor of the motion moving to summer study indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
No.
Noes have it. We will continue discussion. Representative Sapicki.
Representative, sponsor of the bill, for clarity here, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. From the long list that was read, with your amendment, the only thing those districts are going to do is just let the Department of Education know that they already have a policy in place that doesn't need to be infringed upon, doesn't need to be changed, and they're just going to say, we've already got it, here's our policy, we're good to go. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Representative Alexander.
I have some people from my district to speak, if you all would allow that. They are the people, the principal that helped me write this bill with our superintendents.
Sure.
And they're on the list.
Okay, members, without objection, we will go into recess. And we're in recess, and I'm going to like to invite Josh Carter.
And
Come up.
Josh Davis.
And Dr. Joshua Davis.
And we do name people other than Josh in Washington County.
Okay, we're in recess. Gentlemen, if you will, for the AV record, I recognize Mr. I won't say this, Josh. Mr. Carter first, if you'll state your name and position, and then you may begin.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Josh Carter. I'm the principal of Science Hill High School in Johnson City, Tennessee. I want to thank this body for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank Representative Alexander for inviting me here today. And hopefully I can address maybe some of your concerns, Mr. Ritchie, maybe some of your concerns and some of the folks that you represent. I think they said I had 3 minutes. I talk for a living, so I'll try to keep it at 3. Obviously, we went to Representative Alexander about a cell phone policy, a state law. There is probably no greater distraction in the classroom than a cell phone. I think that's universally acknowledged. I think it's also universally acknowledged that cell phones hinder learning and are harmful to students, at least the tools that they use on the cell phone are. There is a vast number of research and there is a lot of movement nationwide moving away from cell phones in schools. I'm sure you're aware of most of that. Some of the best research out there says that for every distraction on a cell phone, it takes a student's 20 minutes to refocus. So if a student gets a notification on a cell phone, it's 20 minutes before they refocus. If a high school is on a 45-minute class period, that's at least half the period. If they get 2 notifications, that's the entire class period. So it's 20 minutes to refocus after a notification. The National School Safety and Security Services says that when students have cell phones in their possession during a school day, it actually hinders school safety. It does not enhance school safety. It hinders school safety, especially if you have an event. Last year, Science Hill High School was swatted. I don't know if you know what that term means, but that means a phone call was placed to 911 that said we had an active shooter on campus when we did not. And so local police and SWAT rolled on our campus with the belief that we were under an active shooter when we were not. That's called a swatting. It's happened in a lot of places across the country, happened to us at Science Hill. And actually, students with their phones hindered our ability to control that situation because they were calling parents, they were calling their house, they were texting different people, and communication back and forth. So it made an already mess a bigger mess. So I can tell you firsthand, when students have cell phones, that does not enhance safety. It actually hinders safety. You probably also know that over 30 school systems in the state of Tennessee have signed on to a lawsuit against some social media groups and the harm that causes. And I'll just end with this. We can make a policy, and we have a policy at Science Hill High School against cell phones. But if you make a law against against cell phones, you're showing the seriousness of the issue. It is a serious issue. And if you, as our state representatives, address that issue, you're showing the seriousness of it. This body has a history of valuing student achievement, student engagement, and student success. And if you address cell phones, that's just another step on that path where you're showing that you value student engagement, student achievement, and student success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Dr. Davis.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Representative Alexander, for having me. My name is Josh Davis. I am the Chief Academic Officer for Washington County Schools. The primary purpose, in addition to all of the things that Dr. Carter has spoke about, is again supporting legislation that ensures the integrity of instructional time in our classrooms. It should come as no surprise that the constant distraction of cell phone use does limit the engagement of our students. Aside from that constant distraction of those notifications that Dr. Carter talked about, there's also many other things at play. As a former high school principal and now a district administrator, it is not uncommon to walk into a classroom, and again, in school systems with policies currently banning or not allowing cell phone use during instructional time, to see kids with AirPods in their ears with the teacher standing in front of them talking. There is no way that a student is paying attention to that instructor or that teacher with music blaring in their ears. Battling cell phone use in the classroom often can pit the teacher against the student and therefore harms that relationship that that teacher must build and create that positive culture and climate in order for education to happen and to have that successful. And again, to reiterate Dr. Carter's point, policies regarding the restriction of cell phone use during instructional time is important because it creates an expectation for all classrooms in all schools and all districts across our state and removes one of those barriers that teachers face in maximizing education.
Thank you very much. We do have a number of our committee who would like to ask questions. We'll go first to Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today and your time in being here. My question is, as I've talked to different people in my district, the biggest challenge is not the cell phones themselves, is the enforcement of this. So how do y'all approach that from an enforcement? It's one thing to ban it, but how do you enforce it?
Either one of you can take that.
Well, I worked a lot of years in discipline in the high school, and now being a principal. Enforcement of cell phone issues is a problem, and that's one of the reasons we're here, because we would like the support of the state legislature on this. You know, a cell phone, an iPhone in a student's pocket is $1,000 device. If you confiscate that device, you've confiscated a $1,000 device that then you're responsible for. But there's different school systems that do different things. The problem becomes the student attachment to the phone. As Dr. Davis was saying, when you try to take that phone, it becomes a real issue. What we're asking for in the policy, and I think the bill that Ms. Alexander has before you, just wants the phone put away and up at all times. And I think most schools in our state, as Mr. Ritchie said, most schools in our state probably have that policy right now. The enforcement of that policy obviously does become an issue and a problem. There's different ways that can be dealt with. What oftentimes happens in a classroom is you can either spend all your time telling a student to put the phone away, or you can spend your time teaching. And the vast majority of our teachers in Tennessee, because they are the professionals that they are, spend their time teaching. They don't spend their time fighting a cell phone fight that disrupts the entire class. So yes, sir, you are correct. The enforcement of that is an issue. Is there an answer to it? I don't know what the silver bullet answer is to it, but it is an issue.
Representative Gant, follow up.
Thank you. With the school safety issues that we all fear with an active shooter, a lot of the first alert panic systems now go to send a message when an active shooter comes in that school. An instant message goes out to all the faculty, and in some situations it goes out to the students. Like in a lot of colleges, like at the Virginia Tech shooting that time, it went out and to the students and saved many lives in that situation. So are we not hurting ourselves in that respect when it comes to an active shooter?
Follow up, gentlemen.
I would say no, sir. I mean, at the University of Virginia, they're in multiple buildings across, I don't know how many acres of land, dormitories, large spaces. I would say in most high schools in the state of Tennessee, it's a single building, maybe two. Our students are pretty well enclosed in the same area. If we have an active situation, we go into a lockdown, we have the same system. Our students, if they've signed up for it, can be alerted to their cell phone. Certainly, we have that system also, and their parents and staff can too. But we have a system that does not rely upon a cell phone. And my guess would be that there is not a single system, all the systems that were mentioned before, nor any other system in the state of Tennessee that has a cell phone as a part of their safety policy. It's certainly not in ours. I understand the question.
If I could add to that.
Yes, sir.
In our schools that are implementing things such as pockets and things, the cell phones are readily accessible. So in the event of an emergency for this very reason, they are right there where they can be distributed to the students, to whatever, as part of those security measures to communicate with parents, et cetera. So, they are there and accessible. We're just talking about during instructional time that they do not have them with them on them.
One more follow up.
Yes. So when we have an active shooter situation, time is of the essence, as we all know in these situations. So are you saying this would keep the phone away from the student from having that notification during class time?
No, not at all. As Dr. Carter said, the cell phones are not part of the internal safety procedures of a school. There are many other alert measures that put a building in lockdown, that notify students. The cell phone is not part of that internal plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can we go to Chairman Lafferty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you guys have covered a few of the things that you do as policy, but could you just concisely tell us what your policy is at your school currently, please?
You recognize?
Yes, sir. Our policies to students are not to have their cell phone out or in use during instructional time unless otherwise given permission by the teacher.
Follow up.
Okay, thank you for that. Exactly what I asked for. Appreciate that. I've been up here long enough to see year after year, we do a little policy here, a little report there, and over time, those pile up. The stacks get tall. We add a lot onto the various school systems across the state. We add a lot to the state, the people here. Our school systems across this state, some of them have tens of thousands of kids. Some of them have a few hundred. Another issue with all these laws and reports and policies that we pass, ask for, whatever, not one size fits every situation. Is there anything, I mean, you guys have already come up with your policy without the law. There's nothing in the law currently that stops other school systems from having a policy. I don't know. I believe everything that you've just told us that goes on. I have no qualms with any of what you told us about the situations and scenarios. But there are more out there across the state of 7 million people. There are more scenarios out there that we don't know. And a single law might in some ways hurt some situation that we can't foresee today. If you got any comments you'd like to add, I'm ready to listen. Thank you.
I would say I'm the person at the district office that handles most of that accountability and the reports to the department, and all of the accountability measures. And I can fairly confidently say that this is that important to add another step to my job, to our responsibilities. We've got to have something in place to help us with the potential dangers that cell phones are creating and the loss of learning that is taking place in our classroom. It's that important.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your time today. Long drive from Washington County to Nashville. I appreciate you coming. When the sponsor and I talked about this, I talked to all my 4 school directors. They were all opposed to it for one reason or the other. They mentioned things like having to add staff to handle the disciplinary infractions. I'm not sure I completely understand that, but the greatest pushback was probably just having things come from Nashville. But I really appreciate you coming because I think it forces a conversation that all of us, however we may vote on this today, are learning something from it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Warner.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you, Chairman. Just a couple questions. This body and this legislator spent numerous hours and numerous tax dollars passing laws for prohibited concepts being taught in our classrooms. How are we to catch a bad actor if a student cannot? I got 2 questions. If a student cannot record what's going on in the class.
Are you asking how can we not catch a teacher doing something bad in a classroom?
Yes, sir. That was a question.
Well, I mean, a student can report it. If they didn't have a recording device, they could report that. The class size limit in the state of Tennessee is 35 for a high school. That should be 35 witnesses in a lot of classes. Not all classes have 35, but that should be 35 witnesses. I hope that the chance that a teacher might say something they're not supposed to say wouldn't prohibit you from passing this bill. The teachers that I work with are of the utmost professionals, not seeking to do things they're not supposed to do. They're well aware of the prohibited materials. My assumption would be that in most of the state that it's the same. Just like any profession, I'm sure there are those that might not, but I don't see that as a bad part of this.
You want to do one follow-up, Representative Warner, then we'll go to the next.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think most teachers do a great job, and I stand behind our teachers 100%. And that's the reason I'm against this big school voucher bill we're fixing to try to pass here.
Let's stay on topic.
I am. I'm on topic here. The second question I have, let's say that we have a student in the classroom that don't have an IEP, that may be still a slow learner, maybe has a hearing problem, maybe just needs that extra time or that extra lesson to go back through and hear it a second or third time. What would be your answer for that?
Currently, in Johnson City, now the gentleman over here makes a good point. There's a lot of students in the state and schools that I do not know. I know one school. I know Science Hill High School. I know Johnson City. But all of our students have a device. We're one-to-one, and our teachers have that material online for those students every day through our learning management system for that very reason, for students who need to go back and see again and learn again and repeat the material that's available to them already.
Thank you, sir, for being here today.
Let's go to Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you for coming here today, gentlemen.
Your mic's not on.
It is. I'm soft-spoken. In the language of the bill, and we always get caught up on hyperbole here, but the language of the bill is the language of the bill. It says that and I'm asking this question to you, during instructional time, you cannot have a cell phone unless the electronic device is authorized or provided to the student by the LEA or public charter school for instructional purposes. So to answer a question that you just got asked, could a policy be invoked of a student that maybe needs extra time, that the policy could be as the teacher could allow that student to have that phone out to be able to record those, to be able to replay them later on? That could be a policy in the language that would give you that latitude. Is that correct?
Mr. Carter, Mr. Davis.
That is certainly correct. And we have all kinds of assistive technology. The students are one-to-one in our district as well. And they all have that laptop that is right there with them. And there are all forms of assistive technology. And yes, policies could be in place even within the IEP structure.
Your follow-up.
And another question is, in the amendment, it says, like you said, your district already has a policy, correct? In the amendment, all it says is that you would report that to the Department of Education that you have that policy. The other 20 or so districts that probably have a policy would probably do the same thing, including my home county of Murray. Now, there's 147 districts. Here's the question I want to know is, you've just laid out a case of how important it is for learning. And we do struggle in the state of Tennessee in learning. Why not the other 127 districts? Can you answer that? Why wouldn't your colleagues say the same thing to us of why this isn't important? Why haven't the other 120 districts done it?
I can't answer for the other 120. My assumption would be they do think that. I've been in education for 25 years, and I would stand here before you and say right now it is absolutely essential to get cell phones outside of a classroom. And I would say most of the people in the state agree with that. It sounds to me, based upon your questions and concerns, that it's the school system being told what to do that they don't like.
Follow-up.
So here's my last question to you. In the bill, it states that this is going to be a policy from the state, unless a district adopts their own policy, which gives you, as a director or the other 120 districts, the ability to craft their own policy and just submit that to the state. So would you, if you were a director that did not have this policy and this bill passed, as that director, speaking hypothetically, would you just go to your board and say, hey, to maintain local control, let's just come up with a policy ourselves?
Follow-up.
If local control is that important to me, yes, sir, that's what I'd do.
Thank you very much.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And thank you even more for what you do for our children. It's vitally important. I'm not the biggest fan of this bill. And one of the reasons why, because it's about accountability for me, right? A lot of things in a lot of things that are happening right now are really only brought to the forefront because people got these phones and we're able to capture it. And that's where, the issue with me for this bill comes into play. And I think about it. I was thinking about what you were saying when you spoke to, the swatting, right? And I don't know if you all have children or not, but I have. My daughter just graduated from high school, thank God. But if she was in an emergency, if there was an emergency at her school or a shooting or something like that, I absolutely would want her to call me first and not rely on y'all to save her life. And I think that every parent would. And are you a parent?
Yes, sir.
Would you want them calling, or would you want your child to call you if there was a school shooting happening in your school? Or
I
would
certainly
you
want to know if she was safe or not. Yes, sir.
I agree. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. And so that's.
But I wouldn't enter the building to try to save her life. I mean, I think that's
right.
what it would be different.
I agree with you. I'm not saying that, but I definitely would want my daughter immediately on the phone with me in a situation like that, right?
Yeah.
And here's where my concern comes into play with the language of the bill, and I get where the sponsor is going with the bill, because I understand it, but in that language it talks about access, but it's not specific when it talks about access, but it talks about control of access. Control of access could mean that we're going to put your phones in these lock bags while you're in class, or we're going to put these phones in the teacher's desk while you're in class, or whatever the idea is for the different districts across the entire state. And so that gives me true pause. And again, I wouldn't want my daughter, putting her life on the line, or I wouldn't want my daughter's life on the line without my daughter having been on the phone with me, so I can, give her, further instruction, on what to do, especially in a panic situation. So that's why this is a challenge for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Let's go to Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. And got several things on here that I just wanted to bring up to address some of the other concerns and some of the comments. I took the opportunity to pull up everybody's policy. So I actually have y'all's policy. Representative Gant asked y'all, in the event of a safety notification, would they get that? Based off of your current policy, they would not get it. And I'm going to read your policy. It says cellular phones will not be used by students during the instruction day, period. The next sentence, cellular phones will be turned off during the school. So there's no way they're going to get a safety notice if their phones are turned off. That's your policy.
Correct.
The second part, if my daughter called me up, I would be the first one running in there to help out. That was my training in the military, and I would gladly go in there to protect those students that are in there. So I just want to put that out there. You mentioned AirPods. You mentioned distraction. Y'all already have a policy in place. If the state passes something, it sounds like there's a issue with enforcement, not regulation or rules. You already have the rule, and you've got people violating the rule to begin with, it sounds like. If we pass it, what is going to end up changing from an enforcement standpoint to where now magically those students are going to be like, oh no, the General Assembly passed a bill, now we've got to listen. I don't see that happening. It sounds like there's a disconnect in leadership there with the school from an enforcement standpoint. To me, I don't know, what would this bill end up doing from that standpoint? Then I'll have a follow-up.
Recognized for response.
Okay. And to the thing about going into the building, law enforcement and the way we respond, that would cause chaos if we allowed all parents to just come in the building and find your kid. I hope you understand what I'm saying when I say that. And I mean, I get what you're saying, but that's not how those situations work. And number two, about enforcement. Yeah, enforcement is an issue on cell phones. There's no doubt. We have a policy. Our teachers work their hardest to enforce that policy. And if I looked at a student and said, well, the General Assembly passed a law, they would not magically put that phone away. What it does help with, though, it helps with parents. And it helps show the seriousness of the issue. If we want to make a policy, and I actually went to our director because I want to have a policy where kids don't have phones at all at any time during the day at Science Hill. Have zero access to a phone from the time they walk in the door to the time they go home. I'm convinced that would be the best thing for us. And there's not a lot of there's not a lot of benefit that I can see to a student having a phone, if any, during a school day. And so the reason I've worked with Ms. Alexander on this bill is because I just believe it's so important for cell phones to be out of school. If you all pass this bill, it shows that you all see that as well, and that seriousness as well. And it just supports us. It doesn't help us enforce it. It doesn't make us enforce it. It doesn't make students do it. It's just a support measure for us. That would be what I would say to that.
And if I could follow up to your point, from a district administration standpoint and a policy standpoint, reading Representative Alexander's bill forced us to look at our own policy. Whereas, in a way, it's going to force districts to look at the policies that are currently in place and potentially update and adapt older policies. Our cell phone policy that's on paper is an older policy that needs to be updated and revised. And this is going to give us the language through the law, through TSBA, to update those policies to make it make more sense. As you said, right now, the policy in our district is they're not on, they're off all day, et cetera. That is not happening. Students have phones with them all day and their own. What we're trying to do is limit that access during instructional time only, which means we need to go back and revise our policy. And something like this can be the vehicle for that to happen.
You have a follow-up, Representative Ritchie?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. And just to follow up, you already have it in your policy that they can't have it out. It actually states that it has to be turned off. Again, I don't know where the 120 number from the LEAs out of the 147, it was 100% of the ones that I contacted all have a policy. So I would think that it's not going to be nowhere near 120 of them that are going to need it. It sounds like it's an enforcement situation to where maybe that's what we need to be addressing for the schools that do have a policy, to where there could be some teeth or something to go along with it. Because you already have it in your policy, whether this passes or it doesn't pass, that rule is already there that the students are not supposed to have it. I don't understand what this is going to end up doing other than giving you a piece of paper to send back to the parents saying that, hey, they shouldn't have this up here. And what I'm hearing from my district and all the others is stop mandating stuff that we're already doing or giving us extra work. And if 100% of the members that are sitting up here, their school districts are already doing it, y'all already have a very thorough thing that what you're sharing, what your concerns are, it's already written. What can we end up doing on the enforcement side to help you out? Because it sounds like that's where the issue is. You keep going back to they're not listening. That's my concern with this whole thing. I think what we're passing here and talking about is a mute issue. It sounds like needs to be more support possibly from the state on the enforcement or the making sure that they're following your actual rules.
And we're asking for that. So the purpose of this is to ask for your support so that it gives us the support of the General Assembly to go back to parents, because our biggest pushback, aside from the students, are oftentimes the parents. When we call parents and we send policies home about limiting access to phones during instructional time only, many parents are pushing back as well. And so this bill and our request to Representative Alexander is asking for also the support of our legislators. So to answer your question, it is exactly that. It is to ask for your support into the school districts and enforcing these policies.
Thank you very much. Members, Representative Love, did you want to ask the last question? Then we're going to go
Yes, sir.
back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your commitment to making schools better. And I've heard everything you said, and I guess the question would be, could you not get a local or private act from the state to make sure that your particular county had the enforcement?
Gentlemen.
From whom? From
From
you?
us. So for example, so like if you have it going on in your district right now, if you're having issues with enforcement, I think we have a mechanism within our body that it could be done just for your school district with legislative action rather than statewide with what you're trying to do.
I'm not familiar with what that would look like, to be honest with you, but I don't think that would be what the bill is looking for, or what we're looking for. No, sir.
Follow up.
Well, so again, I guess it gets to the point. So are you looking to have what you are now doing in your county with more backing from the state for your county? Or are you looking for what you're doing in your county to be put statewide and have more backing from the state from that perspective?
I would say from the state. Could you give me an example of something that is local?
For example, just yesterday in K-12, in metro schools, we have a policy around suspending certain age kids, and brought a bill yesterday to make it statewide, and was encouraged to just keep doing it in Davidson County, right? So I think that you all could just have us bring legislation, or have your representative bring legislation just for your county to say, this is what you want to do in your county, and the state says you must do it in your county.
Okay.
Unless you're trying to do it statewide. That's what I'm trying to get to. What is your intent in bringing and having your legislator bring the bill?
Just support from the state legislature, from the General Assembly. Yes, sir.
For you all?
For Tennessee education and for us. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let's, that was the last one on the list. Representative Slater.
Motion to go back into session.
Got a motion second, back in session. Any objection? Gentlemen, thank you so very much. We're now back in session on the bill. I did have a few people who wanted to talk about it. Representative Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill. We need this bill in Tennessee. I come from the perspective of being in a K-12 environment for over 30 years. Much of that time was prior to cell phone use. Much of it was afterwards. And this bill is needed. It's illustrated by the fact that so many districts already have in place a policy that states that during instructional time, that cell phones cannot be used. We've gotten out into the weeds some when it comes to safety issues. This isn't talking about during an emergency situation. This is talking about during instructional time. This is good legislation. As policymakers for the students of Tennessee, we should be guarding the instructional time of our students. It's important legislation. I'd like to thank you for a couple of things. First of all, thank you for clarifying that if a district already has this in place, a policy in place that prohibits cell phone use during instructional time, then they simply have to let the Department of Education know that. That's important, and I appreciate you bringing that. The other thing that I'd like to thank you for is for making this flexible for districts. There's been a lot of discussion about somehow imposing the will of the state on every single district, but there's plenty of flexibility in your legislation so that districts can determine what it looks like to enforce this policy, what it looks like when it comes to emergency situations, what it looks like in times that are not instructional times. We need to be protecting the instructional time and making that valid. That's why schools exist. Schools exist to teach. And as policymakers in Tennessee, we should be doing everything that we can to make sure that our teachers have a clear path of instructional time. Learning cannot take place unless a student is engaged. And it's obvious that students are not engaged when they're spending time on their cell phones, when they're on their devices. I'll make one more comment as it relates to the safety aspect of things. There's no parent in here. I'm a parent of 4, have 7 grandchildren. Yes, in an emergency situation, we want to know quickly that our kids are safe. There's no doubt about that. There's no argument about that. But being in a K-12 environment and fortunately never having to be in a school shooting or in a place that took place, I have been in several emergency type of situations, health emergencies, weather emergencies, intruders on campus emergencies. Believe me, it's best if the staff and faculty, they're the ones with the devices to communicate with law enforcement, with first responders, instead of confusing the issue. A 5th grader with a cell phone is not the person who I want to be calling the shots as it relates to the protection of my grandchildren. I want the responsible adults in that school to be the one to be able to communicate clearly to first responders. And so I thank you for bringing this bill. This is good legislation. This is good policy for the state of Tennessee, and I gladly support your legislation.
Thank you, Representative. And before I go to the next person, I also want to point this out. When we had this discussion on the balance between we're talking about instruction time and we're talking about safety. And I think I've told many of you before, I sat on the NAEP board, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which tests, it's the nation's report card. It tests students in 4th and 8th grade and 12th grade, 2 in every 4 years. Long-term trend on our nation's report card from 1972 to 2012, our nation's students continue to rise every single year. 2012 hit, and we have been going down ever since. And then COVID, we went over the waterfall. Something is going on since 2012. Now, you want to guess what that is? What happened in 2010? What's that? First iPhone, and then social media hit. Something is going on. I don't have the facts to verify that, but something has been going on for the past 10 years, 13 years. So let's think about instruction versus safety as we move forward. This is great debate we're having, and I appreciate it. Appreciate you bringing the bill so we can have this great debate. Let's go to Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me chime in just a minute with some facts and figures for my colleagues. We have 147 school districts in our state. We have approximately 1 million students, give or take a little bit. We have 87,000 teachers. We have over 1,800 schools. The sampling of schools that was represented is a tiny percentage of that. A policy that's applicable across the state for learning is something that we in the General Assembly not only have the right, but we have the duty to address. Those local school districts that are whining about us interfering, I would ask, do they want us to not interfere with giving them money? At the state legislature, the second largest item in our budget is education. Therefore, that gives us not only the authority, but the responsibility to ensure that the learning environment is set in the proper way. Like some on this committee and some in the room here, I've had the privilege of being in front of a classroom full of students. And I will tell you firsthand, my observation is cell phones are degrading the learning environment in a big way. I would further submit to you that in my youth, we didn't have cell phones and we got along just fine without them. So saying that cell phones are a requirement is a bogus argument. I encourage you to consider the fact that we are responsible to our constituents across the state of Tennessee to encourage the learning environment and increase the value our students get from our education system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's go to Representative McKenzie. You haven't spoken yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, as I listen to get back to what we're kind of talking about here, as I listen to our two guests, and I do thank them for their service. You know, as one said, you got a principal and superintendent, and this gets to, I think, the meat of the concern that I have with this bill. You had the principal saying, I wouldn't let them in the building. If that was the will of the district, LEA, they wouldn't be in the building. So obviously, as the superintendent fully understands, he has to take in multiple factors, multiple schools, multiple situations, multiple parents that may feel a little different. So he can't do what will work in that one school, LEA-wide. So likewise, we're trying to give everybody the same medicine when the illnesses are different. It might be a cold, it may be COVID, it may be the allergies, but we want to give everybody the same medicine. That doesn't work. As a previous speaker spoke, I speak probably 5 to 10 times to 5th, 8th, and 12th graders, have programs there in schools. Knox County has a cell phone policy. I've never seen a cell phone while I'm giving instruction because they have a policy that they enforce in my very limited experiences. But there's a policy, it's enforced, and it just doesn't happen. So my concern with this bill as written is I don't think the amendment does what the conversation that we had at the beginning of it. I think there's still the guts of what was here before the amendment that we took issue with last week is still in the bill. The amendment just added to the bill that we looked at last week, a week before. So that's my concern with the bill as written. So in terms of a question to the sponsor, I would ask you will the result of this bill be enforced across all the LEAs to get to what I've been hearing, the scourge of the nation? And I don't disagree with this is a problem, with the fact that this is a problem, but would this bill solve the scourge that is being reported that's happening across our state?
Representative Alexander.
I think that a law is only as good as the people who follow it. And if your school systems are following the law that has been set in place by the General Assembly, then we should have some good results. I also want to say that the gentleman I brought before you to testify come from an exemplary school system in this state. There's very few of them in this state, especially that has a high school. So I was very honored to have them come and speak to you today because they are doing it right. They know what it takes to make a great school and for their children to achieve.
Thank you. Committee, we have a few more people. Two things. Remember, our chocolate milk is getting hot back there. And number two, I will go out of order. Representative Parkinson, you want to recognize before they have to leave a group?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can ask my comments right behind that since you going out of order and come to. I'm just joking,
Yeah,
Mr.
okay.
Chairman. I'm just joking. Y'all scared him. I do want to recognize Leadership Bartlett. If you'll stand, let's make them feel welcome. We appreciate them being in the building. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And while we're still out of order, Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being out of order, I would want to recognize three friends from Roane County that just come in, two from Rockwood and one from what we affectionately know as South the River. If y'all stand up, we'll give you a hand.
Okay, we're back in order now. I'm going to go back to a few more comments and then we move on to Representative Bolso. You haven't spoken yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, I want to follow up on Chairman White's remark about the national trend that we've seen. Do we know whether there are any other states that have to this point imposed a statewide ban on the use of cell phones? And if so, do we know the results of that practice?
Recognize.
I'm sorry, Representative, I do not know that. I apologize. I can find it out for you, though.
Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a lot of times we don't like it when the federal government hands all these measures down and tells us what to do. And I kind of get that same sense as I talk to school board members back home that are elected to represent their school districts, just like we're elected to represent our districts across the state. So, you know, if we're going to hold those school board members and the local LEAs accountable, I see this as a measure that whether we pass something or not, every LEA has the choice to develop their own platform when it comes to cell phone use. And whether we pass this or not, I heard from these individuals, it's more about the support part of it. And it's not going to change the outcome of the problem that seems to be the enforcement of this. And so when it comes to the enforcement of it, and we start trying to tell the local school boards that we're going to put one foot in the water, but you guys can take the rest of it from the enforcement standpoint, I don't agree with that. I think it's time that, you know, we're held to a high standard as elected representatives, and our school board members should be held to that high standard as well. And if we're circumventing that, those elected officials at the local level, I think we're doing them a disservice and the people in our district a disservice, because that's why we elected them. So I'm, you know, I love you to death and respect you a whole lot. You're a great representative for your district, and you're doing what you think is right. But at the same time, I've got to, you know, vote in favor of what I feel is best for my district. And from what I heard from these individuals, they want support. I think that, if that's what they're looking for from us, from a standpoint of support, we could pass a resolution that encourages all the local school boards and LEAs across this state to come up with a plan that puts an emphasis on non-cell phone use in classrooms. And I totally disagree with my colleague to my left over here that discounted the safety portion of this. I think it plays a great role in safety of our students across this state when it comes to cell phones and notifications, because seconds matter in the event there's an active shooter. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple more, then we're going to wrap this up about 5 minutes. We can, the committee. Been good discussion. Let's go to Representative Parkinson. No, keep going. There's a list. We'll keep going. We'll finish the list. Just want us to keep moving. Keep
Well,
moving.
I'm experiencing a little hate up here, Mr. Chairman.
You're next.
But Mr. Chairman, I'll defer
You're
to
next.
Representative Love. Thank you. Now go ahead. I'm good.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Chairman, so I had a question, and it's maybe a question for legal. In looking at the amendment, if I'm looking at the right one, 16007, that's the one we're on?
Let me confirm. Well, that was the amendment we added to the entire bill. We're going to roll that into 014734 for the whole bill for discussion.
All right, so the amendment, if I'm correct, if I can ask legal, it says by adding the following language at the end of subsection C in section 1.
You want to ask legal?
Yes, is that what
Okay,
the amendment does? Adds to,
Well, let me go out of session. You may address legal.
does this amendment add to subsection, does this amendment language go at the bottom of subsection C in section 1?
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services, yes.
So in essence, this amendment includes all of the old bill and adds this other portion.
Yes, sir.
So that's the issue. Thank you. Can you go back in the session?
You going back in? Any further discussion to legal?
No, I'm good, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Back in session.
So here's a concern I have to the sponsor. I was under the impression that the amendment would require simply if your school district already had a policy, that the only thing they had to do was to send the policy to the Department of Education. It appears as though this says each local board of education and public charter school governing shall submit the policy required in subsection C. So if you don't have a policy, you're not required to have one and then send it.
Representative Alexander, would you like to address that?
I think I understand you correctly. You have to have a policy that prohibits the use of cell phone in instructional time. And you need to submit that policy, you must submit that policy by July 31, 2024.
Follow up.
So, Mr. Chairman, and maybe I didn't hear it correctly, but I was under the impression that we were discussing having a choice for our school districts to adopt one or not. And if they had one, to then send it. This is going to require everybody to have one and also send it.
Yes,
That-
ma'am.
That is correct.
So just so we're clear. If you don't have a policy, you must adopt one, and you also must send it. And I was under the impression that the compromise or the amendment was going to simply say, you're not required to have one, you're just required to send one if you do.
Representative Alexander.
Requires you to have one, and it requires you to submit it.
Okay, thank you. Makes it clear. Thank you.
Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move previous question.
Okay, well, there's a motion before us, parliamentary, we're in order. Any injections to the call? We got injections. So what we'll do, all those in favor, once again, we're going, hang on, let's get through it. We have a motion before us to call the question. There's been an objection to the question. You have a parliamentary question? Then you're recognized.
I want this to come across right. Was we working off a list or are we working off you're choosing who you're going to call on, Chairman?
We're working off a list, but I'm going to people who haven't spoken as we go down our list. We have some people speaking multiple times, so I'm going down the list that way.
I got one simple request. If my good friend there would let me make that one simple request.
Okay, Representative Butler, there's a request been made of you to let Representative Warner. Okay, you're recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Butler. Greatly appreciated. Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote.
Okay, you have 3 hands. That objection, we'll have a roll call vote. Representative Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
We've previous question, which is we're cut off debate and we will move on. So previous question, we call for any objection to the previous question. Seeing none, we are now voting a roll call vote on the bill. We're on House Bill 2758 by Representative Alexander. A yes vote is for the bill to move on to county rules. A no vote is for it not to. Okay, I'm sorry. We're still on previous question. Okay. Clerk, would you call the roll on previous question? If you want to support previous question, vote yes. If you don't want to support previous question, vote no. And I'm trying not to stay confused. Okay. Madam Clerk.
Representative Baum. Representative Bolso. Bolso votes aye. Representative Butler. Butler votes aye. Representative Sapicki. Sapicki votes aye. Representative Fritz. Fritz votes aye. Representative Gant. Gant votes aye. Representative Gillespie. Gillespie votes aye. Representative Haston. Haston votes aye. Representative Hurt. Representative Lafferty. Lafferty is present, not voting. Representative Love. Love votes aye. Representative McKenzie. McKenzie votes aye. Representative Parkinson. Parkinson votes aye. Representative Reagan. Reagan votes aye. Representative Ritchie.
No.
Ritchie votes no. Representative Stevens. Stevens votes aye. Representative Warner. Warner votes aye. Vice Chairman Slater. Slater votes aye. Chairman White.
Aye.
White votes aye.
So previous, oh, sorry, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes, 1 no, and 1 present not voting. 15 ayes.
I'm worried about my math there. So the previous question prevails. We are now, any objection to calling the question? We've already had that. So we're okay with a voice vote? You want a roll call? Okay. We are now on the bill. Those in favor of moving the bill to county rules indicate by saying aye. Those not, say no. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Representative Baum. Representative Bolso. Bolso votes aye. Representative Butler. Butler votes aye. Representative Sapicki. Sapicki votes aye. Representative Fritz. Fritz votes no. Representative Gant. Gant votes no. Representative Gillespie. Gillespie votes aye. Representative Haston. Haston votes no. Representative Hurt. Representative Lafferty. Lafferty is present, not voting. Representative Love. Love votes no. Representative McKenzie. McKenzie votes no. Representative Parkinson. Parkinson votes no. Representative Reagan. Reagan votes aye. Representative Ritchie. Ritchie votes no. Representative Stevens. Stevens votes aye. Representative Warner. Warner votes no. Vice Chairman Slater. Slater votes aye. Chairman White.
Aye.
White votes aye.
He's eight.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 ayes, 8 nays, and 1 present not voting.
Okay, 1 second. We have 8 ayes, 8 noes, and 1 present not voting. 1 second. Okay, the bill fails for lack of majority.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Okay, members, great discussion on that bill. Let's go to item number 4, House Bill 1899 by Representative Rudd. You're recognized. Got a motion and second. Oh, I forgot. Oh, that's right. I did not. Okay, members, let's, we need to continue. Representative Parkinson, we got a sponsor up in the well. Mhm. Okay. Committee, let's come to order, and we're recognizing Representative Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. This is the SRO Expansion Act. This is the same exact bill that we passed in special session last year with this committee's amendment on it that made the bill. And the Senate did not, as you know, take up bills in the special session, but we did pass it through with overwhelming support last year. What this bill does is it is the same bill as I said we passed. And what we have is a severe shortage, especially in rural counties, of law enforcement that can serve as SROs in schools to protect our children. And in the event they can't find a trained deputy in a rural area or anywhere that can serve in schools to guard our children, this would open it up under strict conditions for honorably discharged veterans and retired police officers. It is purely permissive for the LEA. They will work for the LEA and not for the Sheriff's Department. They would come under if they can't find a deputy. The $75,000 stipend would pay for this if they couldn't find one. The expanded SRO applicants must be approved by local law enforcement to carry a firearm on campus. They must be fingerprinted, undergo background checks by the TBI and the FBI, and be evaluated by a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or certified mental health professional. They must also complete 40 hours of compliance with training, required laws, rules, and regulations of peace officers, and meet the minimal standards. And this is we're running into a very serious situation that, especially in rural areas where they can't find trained professionals to serve, that this would help protect our children in schools. And that's what it does by expanding the SRO opportunities.
Thank you, Representative Rudd. With that explanation, let's now go to a couple questions. Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor, thank you for bringing this. As you know, we funded all the schools last year, and we still have more than 500 openings across the state on my last count. So I really appreciate you bringing a solution, fully support it. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the committee. When we were running this bill last year, there were other similar bills. This committee amended the bill for accountability and training. And I think they really strengthened the bill. And I want to thank you for all your input. Chairman Reagan, Chairman Sapicki, and the committee, thank you for what you did with the bill last year.
Okay, Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, sponsor. I understand where you're going. Now, I wasn't sure if I heard, do these individuals, you said no already?
No,
oh,
no,
okay.
I'm
I
not.
thought
No,
you
I'm
were shaking.
just-
I thought you were shaking. I was like, okay. Well, you're fast. Do these individuals have to be post-certified? And are the SROs that are currently hired post-certified now?
Representative Rudd.
The deputies, which are post-certified because they're active deputies, no, they do not have to be post-certified. Otherwise, they would be deputies. This is when they can't find deputies. Now, they do have to meet minimum post requirements that the SROs would go through. But as you know, SROs are much more, go through a 6-month or more process of being trained. These would already be evaluated to have minimal training and to help out, and it would still be determined by local law enforcement whether they were able to carry a gun on campus. And ultimately, we've left this open to the local LEAs so they can write additional policies when they hire these employees to guard our children.
Follow up. Thank you, sir. And that was my next question, the liability being that these individuals are not certified for the LEAs. But is it permissible for the LEAs under your legislation, or how does that work?
Yes, sir, it's permissible. They don't
Okay.
have to use these at all.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Representative Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move previous question.
Okay, question's been called for. Any objections? Hearing none. So all those in favor of House Bill 1899 moving out to finance indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, and our children, thank you too.
Thank you. Item number 5 has been taken off notice. So item number 6, HB 2248 by Representative Hoseclaw. You're recognized. You have a motion second. Explain your bill.
Thank you, Chairman Committee. Hopefully I won't take as long as Alexander's bill. HB 2248 is basically a cleanup bill on a bill we passed last year, HB 1281. And basically the wording is going to be changed. The bill includes the Tennessee Academy of Family Physicians can aid the Department of Health in administering the program. That's all it does.
Okay, that explanation. Questions of our sponsor? Question been called. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2248 out to Gov Ops indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Committee.
Item number 7, House Bill 2158 by Representative Davis. You have a motion and a second. Any amendments we need to deal with?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the amendment 015415 needs
That-
to be added to the bill. It rewrites
That
the
is
bill.
correct. It rewrites the bill. We have a
Yes, sir.
motion and a second. Can we go ahead and add that to the bill committee? Hearing none, no objection. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill for proper discussion indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. You may now discuss your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. And so when I presented this legislation to subcommittee, it was recommended that we wanted to ensure that we got the data for the number of nurses that are in our schools. Currently, those LEAs do not have to report to either the Department of Health or the Department of Education what those ratios are and what the number of students are that have health issues or that are attached to just a single student or the general population. So what this legislation now does is gather that information, gather that data, so that way we know what actually the population of students that we serve that may have chronic illnesses, and then also what resources we have that are addressing those.
Right. So the bill now is amended, Representative Davis, is that we're just gathering the data. We're not requesting any kind of ratio.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's a study. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Members, discussion. Question been called. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2158 out to finance indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience. Item number 8, House Bill 2697 by Representative Moody. Chair Lady Moody.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman and committee. This bill was actually passed last year, and my Senate sponsor carried it. And it was intended to give the 6 weeks of paid leave after birth, stillbirth, or becoming an adopted parent for the charter schools too. Charter schools are public schools. So it wasn't clear. So this bill is clarifying that it is for the charter school employees also.
Okay, Representative Bosso, you have a question?
No, Mr. Chairman, I was going to move previous question.
Any objection to the previous question? Seeing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2697 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. You also have just give me 1 minute. Yeah, we're fine. You also have House Bill 2155, Chair Lady Moody.
Aye.
Got a little bit ahead of himself here. Representative Moody, you can explain your bill?
Yes, sir. Members, this many of you, I hope, had the honor of knowing Michael Marin. He was the Senate Education Research Analyst for 10 years. I met Michael when Senator Gresham hired him to come up here and work. And he worked tirelessly, had so much influence on our education policies. And Michael, unfortunately, he passed away suddenly in September, 37 years old. And so what we're doing with this bill is we're going back to probably one of the last bills he worked hardest on, and that was House Bill 0329. It was a teacher's pay, and the other part of it, which is the part we want to name after Michael, this part is that prohibited the LEA from deducting dues from the wages of the LEA's employees for a professional employees organization. It's already passed, that's in law. That's the part, though, that we wanted to name the Michael Marin Paycheck Protection Act in his memory.
Thank you, Chair Lady Moody. And for those who may not know, most of you do, Michael was a valuable member of our education research in the Senate, research and analyst, and he was a great guy, and greatly missed. So we thank you for giving him this honor. A member's discussion on the bill? Question's been called for. Hearing no objection, all those in favor of moving House Bill 2155 out to calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves out.
Thank
Chair
you.
Lady. Okay, Representative Bricken, you've been patient and waiting. Item number 10, House Bill 2344. You have a motion and a second. We have an amendment, looks like, to deal with.
We certainly do, sir. It is Amendment 016948.
016948. You have a question. You have motion second on the amendment? Okay, it does rewrite the bill. Members, any objection to adding it for proper discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill for proper discussion indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill would allow LEAs across the state to acquire a minimum number of highly functioning, efficient, flexible metal detectors for the safety of our students. They would apply for a grant program through the Department of Education to fund the metal detectors at their LEA. With that, I renew my motion.
Okay, Representative Bricken, members, he does have a guest here to talk on this if you need that. He's available, but first of all, any discussion to Representative Bricken on the pact of his bill? Representative Gant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the grant amount up to? What dollar amount?
It's 17,000, I think it's $200. So 17,000 per metal detector. So it would be up to whatever 3 times that is, whatever.
And what is the
58,000.
maximum amount that is allowable under this legislation for all school districts to apply?
The fiscal note, $7.1 million.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any questions from the committee? Representative Sapicki?
Just two questions. We've already passed the school safety grants, and I know schools are pulling down, because my district has, pulling down metal detectors. Is there anything in this bill that interferes with that?
None.
Representative Sapicki?
And with this grant, it's coming out of the general fund. It's not coming out of lottery. Is that correct?
Correct.
And last one?
You're recognized, Chairman.
Never mind.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Question being called. Any objection to the question? Okay, all those in favor of House Bill 2344 moving out to finance indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Representative Bricken. You have one more on the calendar. Item number 11, House Bill 2388. You got a motion and a second, and it looks like you have an amendment.
Yes, sir. It's 014118.
It also rewrites the bill committee.
That is
Any
correct.
objection? Any objection to adding it to the bill for proper discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill 2388 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This bill came from our directors of career technical educators, and it primarily for middle schools, it puts the same class size in middle school CTE programs that's currently in the high school. So for grades 6 through 8, they would conform to the same CTE coded classes that are allowed in the high school. With that, I renew my motion.
Okay, members, discussion, questions to Representative Bricken. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you. And to the sponsor, how does this change? Does that increase or decrease the sizes in the middle school?
It would generally increase the size from, I guess it goes from currently 25 to a maximum 30 to 30 average to a maximum 35. And this really came about because the CTE instructors say it for scheduling in the middle school, it's dysfunctional the way it is. And again, I've been assured by the CTE folks that this doesn't pose any additional safety risks to those middle school students. Most of those CTE classes in middle school are kind of preliminary explorational type classes. And as I've been told, principals, CTE directors are very diligent and careful in structuring class sizes only to a safety level. So,
thank you, sir.
Representative Ricky.
Thank you, Chairman, and sponsor for the bill, and just kind of point out a couple things that we discussed while I was in K-12. Appreciate that it is permissive. So for the members that are in here, it doesn't require any of the districts to actually increase their size on it. But on the safety side of it, I know that some of the CTE middle school, they are using mechanical things that have sharp. So it's not a, when you describe it as it's kind of like a push, it's almost deceptive from the standpoint. And I know that wasn't your intent of it, but it's almost deceptive to where it's, hey, there's not going to be any risk. There is going to be an added risk from a supervision standpoint when it comes to safety with those class sizes. But because it's permissive, I'm going to support the bill. So I just wanted to point that out for the other members that didn't have the conversation from K-12. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ritchie. Anyone else? We're on House Bill 2388. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 2388, moving out to calendar and rules, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Members, House Bill, item number 12 and item number 13 by Representative Hale have been rolled 1 week. Item number 14 is Representative Harris. Is he in the room? We will roll that to the hill of the calendar if he comes in. Item number 15 by Chairman Lafferty, House Bill 2392. You're recognized. Your motion in a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is just a simple add-on to something that got left out a few years ago during the Focus Act. That was before my time. I don't have all the information about how all that went down, but essentially what happened, state boards, right now the state boards at our universities of higher learning don't have a policy that state that the young men that join their universities must be registered for the draft to qualify for state funds. And all the Tennessee Board of Regents has got it in there. They kept theirs, but for whatever reason, it got left out of the LGIs, the locally governed institutions. So this just simply corrects that and adds that to the code to make it whole. And I take any questions.
Okay, with that explanation, members, any questions of Chairman Lafferty? Chairman Reagan?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the sponsor for bringing this. It closes a hole that could hurt us with federal funding. So thank you, sir, for bringing it.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Further discussion? Hearing none. Any objection to the question being called? Hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2392, moving out to the calendar and rules, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Representative Gant, you have item number 16, House Bill 2528. You're recognized. You got a motion second. Do we have any amendments we need to entertain?
Not that I'm aware of.
Let me check.
Oh,
with-
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. It is 014778 that makes the bill.
That is correct. Okay. Any objection to adding it to the bill since it does rewrite? Hearing none. We are now voting on adding 14778 out to House Bill 2528. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended. Leader Gant.
Mr. Chairman, what this bill does in committee, this bill establishes a mobile panic alarm pilot program of $60,000 max across the state, and it's administered by the Department of Education. The pilot program aims to provide grants to local education agencies known as LEAs, public charter schools and private schools and church-related schools to offset the cost of mobile panic alert systems. The systems must be approved by the Department of Education in consultation with the Department of Safety. The grants will be available for schools across the state. Equal consideration will be given to each grant division. No single grant can be larger than $10,000 per school. Grants will be distributed on a first-come, first-served basis. The Commissioner of Education will create the rules to implement the program. The Department of Education is required to submit annual reports to the General Assembly detailing the fund receipts and payments. And to shorten my talking points on this, Mr. Chairman of Committee, what a mobile panic alarm looks like is it's a wearable. It's a wearable device like a badge that remain with a teacher or staff member at all times. Mobile panic alarms summon help for medical incidents, fights, and other everyday disruptions. They can also lock down a school and immediately initiate a response from first responders in the event of a school shooting or critical emergency. These systems differentiate between types of emergencies clearly. They clearly communicate the need for a lockdown, evacuation, and other response. And Mr. Chairman and committee, programs in other states have proven to be effective when it comes to this. Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, and recently Utah have all passed bills known as Alyssa's Law, requiring this technology in schools, but this is not a mandate. This is just a pilot program that hopefully next year we can come back with more funding that will allow more schools across the state to implement this type of strategy. And I also want to commend my colleague, Representative Bulso, for helping with this last year during our special session. This was one of our initiatives that we worked on together, and I greatly appreciate his support and his efforts in this approach as well. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand ready for questions.
Thank you for that complete description. Members, questions for Leader Gant? Question been called. Any objection? Hearing none, all those in favor of House Bill 2528, moving out to Gov Ops, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Leader Gant. Item number 17 by Representative Hurt has been rolled 1 week. Item number 18, House Bill 1664 by Representative Warner. You do have a motion and a second. I do not see any amendments to deal with, so you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, this is one of those bills that we passed in special session that did not get taken up at the Senate at the time. And I want to thank the great representative from Murray County that carried it in and has helped me with this bill. Members, what this bill does is it authorizes law enforcement agencies to assign at least one law enforcement officer to serve as a school resource officer at the school if the local board of education has not entered into a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with the law enforcement agency. Requires that the chief of the law enforcement agency that's assigned the law enforcement officer to notify and provide certain information to school officials. And that's a brief explanation of what the bill does, and I stand for any questions.
Okay, members, questions to Representative Warner? Okay, question's been called. Any objection on the question? Hearing none. So all those in favor of House Bill 1664, moving out to calendar and rules, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 19, House Bill 2464 by Representative Stevens. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill does two things, and I have an amendment.
You have an amendment that does rewrite the bill, and the amendment number is?
014081.
That is correct. Do I have a motion second on the amendment? Any objection to adding it since it does rewrite the bill for discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the amendment 14081 to House Bill 2464 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, Representative Stevens, you're recognized on a complete amended bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill as amended does two things. First, it requires that substitute teachers in schools receive the annual safety training from the Board of Education where they work. And also it prohibits school systems from hiring substitute teachers that have revoked or suspended licenses. Right now, they're prohibited from hiring ones with revoked licenses. This one adds suspended to that list as well. And that's all the bill does. I ask for your support.
Okay, with that explanation, members, questions? The question been called on the bill. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2464, going to calendar rules, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. It does move out. Representative Stevens, you have item number 20, House Bill 2743.
That's correct. There's no amendments on this one.
There's
Mr.
no
Chairman.
amendments. You have a motion and a second. Explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill seeks to ensure that military families can receive the benefit of in-state tuition should a reassignment result in a temporary family separation. The service member and the dependent must both be U.S. citizens to receive this, and it mirrors the one-year residency requirement for in-state tuition rates, but it applies the residency requirement to the service member, not to the dependent. And so an example would be if a service member gets reassigned to Tennessee and is here, but the family stays back where they were originally to finish out a school year or to finish high school or whatnot, then if they move to Tennessee and the service member's been here for 1 year, then the dependents could qualify for that in-state tuition rate.
Question been called for. Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of House Bill 2743, moving out to finance, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves out to finance. Members, we're down to our last two bills. I'm recognize Chairman Reagan, House Bill 1633.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no amendments on this bill.
No amendments, and you have a motion second. You may begin.
The purpose is to direct the Department of Safety to create a de-escalation training program for all LEA public and charter school personnel. The de-escalation training is a set of techniques utilizing verbal and nonverbal communication skills to reduce conflict, especially violence. The rationale comes from a comptroller study that I requested last year. Over 4 in 10 school shootings in Tennessee are the result of a dispute escalation. 76% of all school shootings occur in high schools or with high school aged personnel. Therefore, it makes sense to train our teachers and administrators on how to de-escalate these disputes before they get to the point where one of the arguers resorts to pulling a gun and starting shooting. With that explanation, I'll stand to answer questions.
Remembers that we have that explanation by Chairman Reagan on House Bill 1633. Any questions? Question's been called for. Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 1633 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Members, we have one more. We rode one to the Hill. That was Representative Harris. What number was that? 14. Let me get back to that number real quick. That was item number 14. Representative Harris, House Bill 2398. You are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and to the committee. House Bill 2398 is a simple bill that would require that each district-wide school safety team and each building level school safety team shall annually review the respective district-wide school safety plan or building level school safety plan. So that way that local law enforcement had an opportunity to know thank you. It's been a day.
Okay, thank you, Representative Harris. Number one, thank you for hanging on to your bill this year. And number two, any further discussion by the members? Question's been called. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 2398, moving out to calendar and rules, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Any further discussion? Do I have a motion to, we are adjourned.